Captain Thorne stared out the viewport of the ISS Vindicator, a ship that looked like it had been cobbled together by a committee of drunk engineers with a penchant for duct tape. The comet they were orbiting had a surface that was as inviting as a bed of nails, but Thorne wasn't one to shy away from uncomfortable situations. That's probably why he was the one chosen to lead Earth's first contact with the Krellnar, the galaxy's most uptight audiophiles. Lyra, remind me why we're bothering with these tone-deaf space squids again? Thorne asked, scratching his chin in a way that suggested he was trying to dig out some wisdom from his stubble. Lyra Voss, the ship's cultural analyst and resident expert on all things weird, squinted at her data pad. Because they think music is some kind of weaponized brainwashing tool, and apparently Earth's greatest hits could turn the galaxy into a bunch of mindless zombies. Or something. Right, Thorne said, rolling his eyes. Because nothing screams world domination like an old Britney Spears track, Lyra smirked. Hey, don't underestimate the power of a catchy tune. Remember when Baby One More Time got stuck in your head during that firefight last year? You were humming it while dodging plasma bolts. Thorne grunted, not willing to admit she had a point. What's the plan then? We go down, shake hands, or tentacles, and convince them we're not cosmic Pied Pipers, something like that, Lyra replied. Though I think they are more worried about humans than Hamelin rodents. It's the cultural implications, you know. We might be the universe's Mozart and they're scared shitless. The ship gave a groan, much like an elderly man attempting yoga as it adjusted its orbit. Thorne glanced at the control panel, which was lit up like a Christmas tree. Why do I feel like this is going to be one of those days where I'll wish I'd brought more than a blaster and some breath mints? Because it will be, Lyra said cheerfully. I mean, when has a first contact mission ever gone smoothly? It's not like we're landing in paradise. More like a rock concert in hell, except without the music. Fantastic, Thorne muttered. Let's get this over with. The shuttle ride down to the comet was about as smooth as a tumble in a washing machine. Thorne and Lyra were strapped in tight, but it didn't stop them from jostling around like marbles in a tin can. If the Krellnar hated music, they were going to love the racket this tin can made. As they descended, Thorne caught sight of the Krellnar emissaries waiting for them on the surface. They were hard to miss, giant squid-like entities with skin that shimmered in shades of purple and green. They wore expressions that suggested they'd rather be anywhere else but here, which was a sentiment Thorne could relate to. So, are we supposed to curtsy or bow? Thorne asked as the shuttle touched down with a thud. Probably neither. Just act like you're not impressed, Lyra suggested, unbuckling her harness with a sense of dread that could only come from years of dealing with alien diplomats who had all the charisma of a wet sponge. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the pair stepped out into the biting cold. The ground crunched underfoot, the kind of sound that said welcome. Now freeze to death, the Krellnar leader, a particularly grandiose specimen with tentacles that looked capable of multitasking like a mother of four, slithered forward. Captain Thorne, cultural analyst Voss, it gurgled in a voice that could only be described as a cross between a whale song and a malfunctioning blender. Your presence is acknowledged. Thorne gave a half-hearted salute. Likewise. Nice comet you've got here. Really brings out the existential dread. The Krellnar didn't laugh. Not that Thorne expected them to. He was used to his jokes falling flat with species that didn't have a sense of humor. We are here to discuss the threat your species poses with your auditory weaponry. Lyra stepped forward, trying to look as diplomatic as possible in a parka that was 3 sizes too big. Earth's music isn't a weapon. It's more like an expression of cultural identity, a way of communicating emotions and experiences. The Krellnar regarded her with an expression that suggested they'd rather be locked in a room with a yodeler. All evidence indicates otherwise. Our studies have shown your music can alter neural pathways, influence mood, and even cause involuntary physical reactions. Sounds like you've been listening to my ex's mixtape, Thorne quipped. Lyra shot him a look that said, not helping, But Thorn was already past caring. Diplomacy was like a dance, and Thorn was the guy who always stepped on toes. Look, he continued, we're not here to turn your brain into jelly with smooth jazz, okay? We just want to coexist without any intergalactic karaoke wars. The Krellnar leader wobbled, which Thorn took as some kind of contemplative gesture. We have heard tales of your Beethoven, your Bach, your Bieber. Trust me, nobody on Earth wants to own up to that last one, Thorn said. Lyra decided to steer the conversation back on track before Thorn could dig them into a deeper hole. What if we demonstrated how music is really used on Earth? Maybe we could find common ground. The Krellnar made a noise that was either agreement or indigestion. A demonstration would be acceptable. But know this, if your intentions are deceitful, our response will be swift and without mercy. Thorn leaned over to Lyra, whispering, good thing I wasn't planning on doing my tribute to the Wiggles. Shut up and let's get this over with, Lyra whispered back. They spent the next hour setting up a portable speaker system that had seen better days. Its wires held together more by hope than actual connectors. Thorn was on edge, waiting for the Krellnar to decide that their version of peace negotiations involved a good old-fashioned disintegration ray. Lyra chose a playlist that was a mix of classical, rock, and pop, just enough to show variety without triggering a galactic incident. As the first notes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the icy air, Thorn watched the Krellnar closely for any signs of violent reactions. To his surprise, the Krellnar leader seemed intrigued. Its tentacles shifted in a way that suggested interest rather than aggression. When the symphony ended, there was a moment of silence, broken only by the crackling of static. Your expression is fascinating, the Krellnar leader admitted, its voice softer like a blender on the lowest setting. See. Told you we're not here to brainwash you, Thorn said, unable to resist a smug grin. But still, the alien added, we must consider the implications. Music, as you call it, holds significant power. Lyra nodded, hopeful. Maybe we can work together to understand it better. Share knowledge, build bridges, and all that jazz. The Krellnar inquired, curious. Figure of speech, Thorn interjected. Not the best starting point for beginners. Trust me, the Krellnar exchanged glances or whatever passed for glances in their species. We will deliberate, discuss. But know this, humans, should your melodies prove more dangerous than beneficial, we will not hesitate to act. Thorn gave a mock salute. Wouldn't expect anything less. But maybe, just maybe, we can drop the gloves and learn something from each other. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Thorn couldn't help but feel a twinge of optimism. It was rare, like finding a clean pair of socks in his quarters. Maybe Earth's greatest hits could do more than just entertain. Maybe they could open doors and shut down fears. Think they'll come around? Lyra asked as they climbed aboard. Maybe, Thorn replied, or they'll try to turn Mozart into a weapon. Either way, it'll be interesting. The shuttle lifted off, leaving the comet and its uneasy alliance behind. Thorn settled back in his seat, ready for the bumpy ride back to the Vindicator. He had a feeling this was just the beginning, and like any good song, the real challenge was hitting the right notes at the right time. The Krellnar emissary watched the humans' departure, its mind a whirl of uncertainty and intrigue. As the last notes of Earth's music faded, it wondered if it had just witnessed the beginning of a new era or the prelude to disaster. Either way, it was a melody it wouldn't soon forget. Captain Thorn leaned back in his uncomfortable captain's chair aboard the ISS Vindicator. The thing creaked beneath him like it was staging its own protest. He glanced over at Lyra Voss, whose face was buried in her data pad, likely searching for the latest in how not to piss off space squids or some other useful tome. Any luck finding a playlist that won't lead to our immediate annihilation? Thorn asked, spinning slightly in his chair like an impatient child. Lyra snorted. If the Krellnar's reaction to Beethoven was any indication, I'm thinking maybe a nice silent film might be more their speed. Thorn chuckled. Well, if they're going to be our new galactic overlords, I suppose mute obeisance is better than getting vaporized for humming Stairway to Heaven. The comms panel blinked, demanding attention like a petulant toddler. Thorn hit the button, and a hologram of the Krelnar leader flickered into existence. It was like watching a jellyfish desperately trying to figure out what all the fuss was about land dwellers. Captain Thorn, the Krelnar began, its voice a symphony of grinding gears and dissonant harmonics. Your recent demonstration of Earth's music has left us unsettled. Right. Thorn could think of a few more words, but that one worked. Unsettled how? Thorn asked, aiming for an air of professionalism but landing somewhere closer to barely holding it together. Your music, the Krelnar continued, possesses the potential to influence cognitive processes across our neural matrix. This poses a significant risk to our species' autonomy. Autonomy? Lyra interjected. You mean you're worried about becoming intergalactic fanboys? We fear your auditory weaponry could subjugate our kind, turning us into drones of your Earth culture, the Krelnar clarified. Thorn arched an eyebrow. You mean like when we all started wearing skinny jeans because someone on TV said they were in? Lyra rolled her eyes. Focus, Thorn. Oh, I'm focused, Thorn shot back. Focused on not getting our asses handed to us for having a damn symphony collection. The Krelnar leader's hologram shifted, as if the entire concept of Earth's music was trying to slip out of its grasp. We propose a cessation of all musical transmissions from Earth. Hold on, Thorn said, holding up a hand. Music is a pretty integral part of human culture. We can't just flip a switch and pretend it doesn't exist. Lyra nodded in agreement, tapping furiously on her data pad. Music isn't a weapon, it's a way to connect. Share emotions, history, ideas, dangerous ideas, the Krelnar interrupted. We have observed the effects of your auditory stimuli on several lower life forms. It is transformative, Thorn frowned. You mean like how a good beat can make you tap your foot, more akin to complete neurological restructuring. Thorn shared a glance with Lyra, who shrugged as if to say, well, this is a fine mess. So what do you suggest? Thorn asked, trying to sound reasonable but coming off more like he was asking for the best way to remove a splinter from his foot. We demand Earth ceases all musical activities that may reach beyond your atmosphere, the Krelnar insisted, their tone leaving no room for argument. Lyra pursed her lips, and if we say no, then we will be forced to take measures to protect our civilization. Measures, Thorn repeated, drumming his fingers on the armrest. That's a nice way of saying we'll blow you to bits, right? The Krelnar leader's tentacles quivered, which Thorn took as the equivalent of a nod. We trust it will not come to that. Thorn sighed, the kind of weary exhalation that suggested he was done with this conversation before it began. Give us a moment, will you? He said, and cut the transmission before the Krelnar could respond. Lyra looked up from her screen. So, what's the plan, Captain? The plan. Thorn echoed, scratching at his chin like there might be a secret escape hatch hidden in his stubble. We need to convince them we're more than just a potential threat. Maybe find a way to show them that music isn't some sinister plot. Lyra nodded, though her expression suggested she was about as optimistic as a turkey the day before Thanksgiving. We need more information on their culture. There's got to be something we can use to bridge this gap. Right, Thorn agreed, standing up and heading towards the ship's library, a grand term for what was essentially a closet with a couple of data banks. We'll need to dig into everything we've got on the Krelnar. The library was a cramped space, more like an afterthought than an actual room for research. Its shelves were crammed with data pads, each one labeled with a subject that ranged from intergalactic diplomacy to how not to die, Space Edition. Thorn grabbed a few pads at random, tossing one to Lyra. Start searching for anything on Krelnar culture. We need to figure out what makes them tick, and fast. Lyra caught the pad, flipping it open with a flick of her wrist. Let's see, dietary habits, mating rituals, might want to stay away from that one. Ah, here we go, social constructs and shared beliefs. Do they believe in anything that isn't trying to kill us? Thorn asked, scanning through his own data pad with a grimace. Apparently, they have a strong communal mentality, Lyra read aloud. They value the collective over the individual. That might explain why they're so afraid of anything that could disrupt their unity. Collective consciousness, huh? Thorn mused. So they're scared our music might turn them into a bunch of rebels or individuals, Lyra added. They think our music could give them ideas, make them question their place in their society. Thorn rubbed at the back of his neck. All right, so we've got to show them that music doesn't have to be a bad thing, that it can be about more than just individuality. It can unify too. Lyra nodded, closing the pad with a snap. If only we could find a way to demonstrate that. Thorn paused, a thought forming like a storm cloud on the horizon. What if we organized some kind of exchange? Share some of our music with them and they could show us their culture. Maybe find some common ground, like a space-age battle of the bands. Lyra asked, raising an eyebrow, more like a peaceful cultural exchange. No guitars required, Thorn said, though he couldn't help but grin at the image of the Krelnar trying to play an air guitar with their tentacles. Well, it beats sitting around waiting to be blown out of the sky, Lyra agreed, her expression softening. We'll need to pitch it to the Krelnar, though. Make them see it's not a threat. Thorn nodded, determination setting in. All right, let's do it. Cue up the diplomacy track and let's get ready to dance. The comms panel blinked again, the Krelnar leader's hologram reappearing with an air of impatience. Have you reached a decision? It asked, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. Thorn took a deep breath. We have a proposal, an exchange of sorts. We share some of our music with you and you show us your cultural practices. It's not about changing you. It's about understanding each other. The Krelnar leader's image flickered, and for a moment Thorn thought the transmission would cut out, along with any hope of an agreement. But instead the alien pondered, its tentacles weaving patterns of contemplation. In exchange, the Krelnar finally spoke. This would demonstrate trust in your intentions. Exactly, Lyra chimed in, stepping closer to the comms. See it as a gesture of goodwill. We both learn. We both grow. There was a pause, a silence filled with the potential of discovery or disaster. Then slowly, the Krelnar nodded, a gesture they seemed to have picked up from humans. We will consider this proposal, the leader said. However, understand that any attempts to deceive or manipulate will be met with severe repercussions. Understood, Thorn replied, doing his best to sound like a sensible diplomat and not someone who had just made up this plan on the spot. We'll await your response. The hologram vanished, leaving Thorn and Lyra alone once more in the dimly lit room. Well, Thorn said, clapping his hands together. Now we wait and see if they're ready to tune in or tune us out. Lyra rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of a smile playing at her lips. Let's hope their idea of cultural exchange doesn't involve us ending up as dinner. Thorn chuckled, though the laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. Guess there's no such thing as a quiet day in space. Huh, no, Lyra agreed, her voice tired yet hopeful. But who wants quiet when you can have an interstellar symphony? With that, they set to work, preparing the Vindicator for the possibility of an unprecedented cultural exchange, all the while knowing that the fate of Earth's music, and maybe even humanity itself, hung in the balance. As they worked, Thorn found himself humming a tune, a little melody that seemed to sum up the absurdity of it all. After all, if humanity was going to face the end, it might as well do so with a song on its lips. Thorn stood at the edge of the ritual site, which had all the charm of a junkyard on a rainy day. Ancient Krelnar artifacts littered the ground, each one looking more like a rejected piece from an alien yard sale than a sacred relic. After all, nothing screamed historical significance, like a pile of stones arranged in a shape that might have meant something to someone, somewhere, once. Lyra, eyes glued to her data pad, was knee-deep in the archaeological equivalent of a dumpster dive. Her enthusiasm was contagious, like a bad cold. Look at this, Thorn, she called, holding up a metallic object that could have been anything from an alien spoon to a ceremonial nose picker. This might relate to how the Krellnar used sound historically. Thorn squinted at the artifact, scratching his chin as though deep in thought. In reality, he was considering the odds of them finding anything useful before the Krellnar decided to turn them into space debris. So, you're saying the Krellnar weren't always allergic to a good tune? Possibly, Lyra said, thumbing through pages of Krellnar hieroglyphs with the sort of excitement that only someone who really liked homework could muster. There are references here to communal gatherings centered around sound. Thorn imagined Krellnar rave parties, all tentacles and glow sticks. You think they had like concerts or something, more like ceremonial chants, Lyra corrected, the light of discovery in her eyes, or maybe it was just the reflection from her data pad. Sound might have been integral to their rituals. Thorn chuckled, picturing an alien Gregorian choir. So they went from singing Cumbia to freaking out over Katy Perry. Lyra shot him a look. The point is, Thorn, if music was part of their culture, it could explain why they're so terrified. Maybe they're afraid of rediscovering something they've lost. And we're the accidental DJ bringing back the hits, Thorn mused. Great, just what I wanted. Lyra continued sifting through the artifacts, her movements as precise as a surgeon's or a particularly finicky housekeeper. These symbols could indicate a map of their neural network. Maybe sound was used to synchronize their collective consciousness. Thorn raised an eyebrow. And now they think it'll make them think for themselves. Scary stuff. Exactly, Lyra said. If we can understand how they used sound, we might be able to convince them it doesn't have to mean chaos. Thorn glanced around at the site, trying to find inspiration in what looked like an alien flea market. Well, let's hope we find their greatest hits collection buried under all this. As Lyra continued her archaeological escapade, Thorn's comms panel crackled to life, spitting static like a disgruntled cat. He hesitated before answering, half hoping it was a wrong number. No such luck. The Krellnar leader's hologram appeared, looking as cheerful as a funeral director at a clown convention. Captain Thorn, the Krellnar said, their voice dripping with the enthusiasm of a tax audit, we have considered your proposal. Great, Thorn replied, adopting a tone that could only be described as politely terrified. And we find merit in this exchange, the leader conceded, which Thorn took as an intergalactic thumbs up. It is not without risk, but it may provide the understanding we seek. Thorn resisted the urge to sigh in relief. Fantastic. We'll send over a selection of human music that's less brainwashy and more feel-good, maybe some Beethoven or a Beatles track. It is decided then, the Krellnar agreed, their tentacles pulsing in what might have been approval. We shall prepare a demonstration of our cultural practices as well. Thorn nodded, hoping their cultural practices didn't involve anything too messy. Looking forward to it. We'll share some tracks that show music's power to unite, not divide. The hologram flickered, the Krellnar's presence fading like a bad smell in a strong breeze. Thorn turned to find Lyra grinning, clearly having enjoyed his diplomatic tap dance. Nice moves, she said, returning to her data pad. Think we've got a chance. About as good a chance as a snowball in hell, Thorn admitted, but it's better than nothing. They spent the next few hours compiling a selection of Earth's most benign melodies, an auditory piece offering laced with hope and just a dash of desperation. As they worked, Thorn couldn't help but wonder if they were about to cure the Krellnar's cultural amnesia or just add fuel to their paranoia bonfire. Lyra tapped her data pad, bringing up a potential playlist. How about some classical pieces? They're complex but not overpowering. Sure, Thorn agreed. Just nothing too catchy. Last thing we need is the Krellnar getting Let It Go stuck in their heads. Lyra chuckled, loading the music files onto a transmission disc. Imagine them trying to explain that to their leaders. Thorn smirked. Intergalactic incident. Human pop hits invade alien brains. Film at 11. With their musical piece offering ready, they prepared to transmit it to the Krellnar, hoping it wouldn't result in a diplomatic disaster or worse, a galactic earworm epidemic. The Krelnar leader's hologram reappeared, looking about as excited as a fish in a desert. "We have received your transmissions," they announced, their voice as flat as a pancake under a steamroller. "Great," Thorn replied, trying to sound upbeat. "We hope it gives you a new perspective on our culture." The Krelnar leader's tentacles twitched. "We shall begin our presentation shortly. We anticipate your understanding of our practices." Thorn nodded, feeling slightly like he was on a blind date with a porcupine. Looking forward to it. As the hologram faded, Lyra shot him a wry grin. "You're really making friends, aren't you?" "Just call me Mr. Congeniality," Thorn replied, rolling his eyes. "Let's just hope this doesn't end with us as the main course at their next ritual." They settled into their seats, the weight of the situation pressing down on them like a bad hangover. As they waited for the Krelnar's cultural broadcast, Thorn couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of either a breakthrough or a breakdown. Finally, the comms panel sprang to life once more, projecting an intricate dance of lights and sounds that seemed to pulse with life. The Krelnar demonstration unfolded before them, an alien symphony of movement and music that was as beautiful as it was strange. Lyra watched, her eyes wide with awe. "It's incredible," she whispered, captivated by the performance. Thorn nodded, equally entranced. "Yeah, makes you wonder why they gave it up." The display continued, revealing the depth of Krelnar culture, each note and movement a testament to a society that had once embraced music as a fundamental part of life. As the performance drew to a close, Thorn felt a strange sense of optimism, a flicker of hope in the darkness of space. Maybe, just maybe, they were on the right track. The Krelnar leader reappeared, their demeanor more relaxed, as if the performance had soothed their rigid exterior. "We have shared our practices," they said. "It is our hope that this exchange will foster mutual understanding." Thorn nodded, choosing his words carefully. "Thanks for sharing that with us. It was enlightening." Lyra piped in, her voice sincere. "Your culture is beautiful. We see now why you cherish it so much." The Krelnar leader's tentacles curled in a gesture that might have been a smile. "We shall continue to explore this path of understanding." As the hologram faded, Thorn turned to Lyra, a rare grin on his face. "Well, we didn't get blown up. I call that a win." Lyra laughed, the sound bright in the dim cabin. "For now, hopefully this is just the beginning." Thorn nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility lift slightly from his shoulders. They had taken the first step in a journey that could change everything, a step toward bridging the divide between two very different worlds. "Let's keep it going," Thorn said, determination in his voice. "We've got a galaxy to prove wrong." With that, they set to work, their mission clear: to build a bridge of sound and understanding where fear and ignorance had once reigned. And as they worked, the echo of the Krelnar symphony lingered in the air, a reminder of the power of music to unite even the most unlikely of allies. The air inside the ISS Vindicator hummed with that unique blend of hope and impending doom that only comes from trying to reintroduce music to a species that saw it as a weapon of mass destruction. Captain Thorn leaned back in his seat, tapping a rhythmic beat on the armrest. Lyra shot him an amused glance, one eyebrow raised like a judge at a particularly strange talent show. "You know, if we're wrong about this, we might end up as the first casualties in the intergalactic war against pop music," Lyra quipped, her fingers dancing over the data pad like she was playing a particularly complicated game of interstellar Sudoku. Thorn snorted. "And here I thought we'd get medals for cultural exchange. Instead, we might just end up with our heads on Krelnar stakes." As if on cue, the comms panel crackled to life, the sound sharp enough to make Thorn wince. The hologram of the Krelnar leader appeared, their expression as welcoming as a scorpion in a shoe. "Captain Thorn," the Krelnar leader began, their voice dripping with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for used starship salesmen. "We have reviewed your offerings." "Glad to hear it," Thorn replied, doing his best impression of a man who wasn't about to unravel like a cheap sweater in a hurricane. "What did you think?" The Krelnar leader's tentacles twitched, flicking back and forth like they were conducting their own personal symphony of doom. "We are concerned. Your music has potential repercussions on our society." Thorn sighed, his breath heavy with the weight of 1,000 potential misunderstandings. "Look, we're not trying to brainwash you into a Kangal line. We just think music could be a bridge, not a battering ram." The Krelnar leader's gaze was as cold as a spacewalk without a suit. "We cannot dismiss the risk. Therefore, we have decided that Earth must surrender all musical knowledge within 5 of your Earth days, or face the consequences." Lyra, who had been scribbling notes on her data pad, froze mid-word. "Wait, what? You can't just demand we hand over our entire cultural history like it's a playlist on shuffle." "We can and we have," the Krelnar leader replied, their tone as unyielding as a black hole. "Fail to comply, and we will be forced to consider more aggressive measures." Thorn ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the universe settle on his shoulders like a particularly annoying parrot. "What kind of measures are we talking about here?" The Krelnar leader paused, their tentacles curling inward like they were contemplating the meaning of life, or at least a decent dessert menu. "The cessation of all diplomatic relations, the declaration of your music as contraband, and potential military action against your planet." "Well, that escalated quickly," Thorn muttered under his breath, turning to Lyra with a look that screamed we're screwed without uttering a word. Lyra's eyes were wide, her usual enthusiasm replaced with a determination that could probably melt steel beams, or at least make them sweat a little. "Captain, we can't let this happen. Music is too important to just hand over like a set of car keys." Thorn nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed, but we need a plan and we need it fast." The Krelnar leader's image flickered, their patience wearing thin. "We expect your decision soon, Captain Thorn. For your sake, we hope it is the correct one." The hologram blinked out, leaving a silence so heavy it nearly crushed the air out of the room. Thorn looked at Lyra, his mind racing faster than a hyperspace jump with a hangover. "All right, Voss," he said, his voice tinged with a humor that was more gallows than garden variety. "Any brilliant ideas that don't end with us getting vaporized or wearing one of those tacky I survived a Krelnar invasion t-shirts?" Lyra tapped her chin, her mind working like a finely tuned engine, or at least one that hadn't been sabotaged by alien paranoia. "We need to show them the value of music without triggering their invasion reflex." Thorn nodded, his eyes narrowing as if he could will the solution into existence. "Okay, so how do we do that without them deciding our planet's a threat?" "Maybe we can use music to highlight the benefits of diversity and creativity," Lyra suggested, her voice decisive. "Show them that it enhances individuality without causing chaos." Thorn chuckled, the sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough. "A tall order, but it beats surrendering everything we know about music." Lyra grinned, her enthusiasm returning like a boomerang that refused to be thrown off course. "Let's gather examples from Earth's history where music brought people together. We could create a presentation that shows how it can promote peace and understanding, not just fear and control." Thorn nodded, a plan forming in his mind like an inkblot test gone right. "All right, let's get cracking. We've got 5 days to convince them we're not the Pied Pipers of destruction." They set to work, their fingers flying over data pads and screens like musicians playing a high-stakes concerto. Thorn pulled up historical records of music's impact on Earth, everything from the Beatles to Beethoven, protest anthems to symphonies that had echoed through concert halls and revolutions alike. "Remember the Berlin Wall?" Thorn said, pulling up an old video of David Hasselhoff singing "Looking for Freedom" in front of a crowd as the wall came down. "If the Hoff can do it, maybe we can too." Lyra snorted, shaking her head with amusement. "If we're resorting to the Hoff as our ambassador, we're in deeper than I thought." "We need to highlight moments where music was the catalyst for change," Thorn said, his finger tapping a steady rhythm on the console. "Moments where it transcended language and culture." Lyra nodded, her data pad whirring as she compiled clips, audio files, and testimonies. Music festivals, international collaborations, healing rituals, everything that shows the positive impact. As they worked, the hours ticked by with the urgency of a countdown clock in a bomb squad movie. Thorne's mind flitted between desperation and determination, his thoughts a chaotic symphony of potential outcomes. On the fourth day, just as Thorne was considering whether bribery or begging might be their best option, the Krelnar delegation arrived in person, or in whatever form passed for in person when you were dealing with a species that looked like the love child of a squid and a particularly grumpy cactus. The delegation landed on the Vindicator with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, their presence a stark reminder that the clock was ticking and the stakes were higher than Thorne's blood pressure after a double espresso. "Captain Thorne," the head of the delegation began, their voice as smooth as sandpaper, "we have arrived to finalize the terms of your surrender." Thorne forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Glad to have you aboard," he said, gesturing to the conference room with a flourish usually reserved for magicians and used car salesmen. The delegation filed in, their movements as coordinated as a synchronized swimming team, albeit one that had never seen water before. Thorne took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of impending disaster, and began his pitch. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, his tone a fine blend of optimism and desperation. "And, whatever the rest of you are, we've put together a presentation that we believe will demonstrate the true nature of Earth's music culture." Lyra took over, her voice steady as she began the slideshow. Images flickered across the screen, crowds at Woodstock, orchestras in concert halls, a flash of Queen at Live Aid. "Music has been a unifying force on our planet," she explained, her words a plea wrapped in a lesson. "It has brought people together across cultural and linguistic divides." The Krelnar watched, their tentacles twitching in what Thorne hoped wasn't a sign of impending violence. More images followed, protest songs that had fueled revolutions, lullabies that had soothed generations of children, national anthems that had played as tears streamed down the faces of athletes and soldiers alike. "This isn't just noise," Thorne added, leaning forward with a sincerity that could almost be mistaken for bravery. "It's history, it's emotion, it's what makes us." Us. The room was silent as the final notes of the presentation faded away, the tension thick enough to cut with a rusty butter knife. Thorne held his breath, waiting for the Krelnar to react, positively, negatively, anything that wasn't a declaration of war. The head of the delegation finally spoke, their voice as unreadable as the Mona Lisa's smile. "Your presentation is intriguing. We shall consider your argument." Thorne felt the knot in his stomach loosen just a fraction, hope flickering like a candle in a windstorm. "That's all we ask," he said, his relief palpable. The Krelnar delegation rose, their departure as abrupt as their arrival. "We will convey your message to our leaders," their head said, a note of contemplation in their tone. "You will hear from us before the deadline." As they left, Thorne turned to Lyra, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. "Think we made a dent?" Lyra shrugged, her smile wry. "If nothing else, we bought ourselves some breathing room." "Breathing room's good," Thorne agreed, feeling the weight of the universe shift ever so slightly off his shoulders. Now we wait. And wait they did, the hours stretching before them like an endless expanse of starry sky, the fate of their planet hanging in the balance. But for the first time in days, Thorne felt that maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance. "Let's hope they choose harmony over discord," Lyra said, echoing the sentiment that pulsed through the ship like a heartbeat. Thorne nodded, the future uncertain but the path clearer than it had been before. "Here's to peace talks," he said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to the unknown. And with that, they settled in to await the Krelnar's decision, the echoes of Earth's music a quiet reminder of what they stood to lose and what they fought to preserve. The ISS Vindicator hung in orbit like a fly caught in amber, held hostage by the galaxy's most humorless bureaucrats. Captain Thorne paced the bridge, his mind a tangled mess of anxiety and mental notes of how not to negotiate interplanetary peace treaties. 5 days had never felt so much like a ticking bomb with a fancy bow on top. Lyra Voss, ever the optimist, was digging into the Krelnar data pad like it held the secrets to the universe, or at least a decent recipe for Krelnar-friendly brownies. "Look, Captain," she said, gesturing at a series of hieroglyphs that danced across the screen in a manner not entirely unlike a waltz. "There's something here about a chamber of echoes beneath the ritual site." Thorne paused, brow furrowed. "Sounds more like the title of a pretentious art exhibition than a savior of the human race. Apparently, it's where they stored their instruments," Lyra continued, tilting the pad so Thorne could see. "Lost to time and paranoia, just waiting for some genius or idiots like us to stumble upon them. So, what? We find a bunch of dusty alien clarinets and hope the Krelnar suddenly decide we're not worth vaporizing." Lyra shrugged, a smile playing at her lips. "If nothing else, it'll make for a hell of a story. Come on, Captain. A little archaeological adventure never hurt anyone, except for maybe that one guy, but he was kind of asking for it." Thorne sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, grab your kit. Let's go see if we can save Earth with the power of a good old-fashioned jam session." The pair suited up and descended to the comet's surface, the ritual site looming like an ancient relic from an era where bad ideas were still being workshopped. The artifacts scattered about seemed to sneer at them, as if daring them to find a solution amid the rubble. "Here goes nothing," Thorne muttered, stepping gingerly through the debris. "Hope you brought your lucky digging stick, Voss." Lyra flashed a grin that was equal parts mischief and determination. More like a data pad with holographic schematics, but same difference. With the map guiding them, they poked and prodded until a hidden panel revealed itself. A complex series of levers and symbols lay beneath it, a puzzle crafted by a civilization that clearly had too much time on its tentacles. "Great," Thorne said, eyeing the contraption. "A logic puzzle designed by squid mathematicians. My favorite." "Think of it like Sudoku," Lyra suggested, tapping her pad. "Only, if you get it wrong, we might trigger a localized apocalypse." "Comforting." Thorne hesitated, then reluctantly began fiddling with the levers. After several minutes and a lot of swearing, the ground beneath them shuddered, and a section of the floor grated open, revealing a staircase spiraling down into shadow. "Ladies first," Thorne said with a smirk, gesturing grandly. Lyra rolled her eyes but led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. As they descended, the air grew noticeably cooler, and the walls hummed with a subtle vibration, like a tuning fork on the verge of resonance. The chamber they entered was vast, filled with dust and relics that glimmered dully under their lights. Instruments of unknown design lay scattered about, strings, pipes, and things that defied simple categorization. "Well, would you look at that?" Thorne said, hands on his hips. "We've hit the mother lode of alien garage bands." Lyra picked up a stringed instrument, brushing off the dirt. "Think these things still work?" "Let's hope they do more than just look pretty," Thorne replied, kneeling beside a set of drums that looked like they belonged in a Salvador Dali painting. "Otherwise, we're going to be the first humans to die of disappointment." As they tested the instruments, a low rumble began to echo through the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. Thorne," Lyra said, her voice tight with unease as the ground trembled beneath their feet. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." "Depends," Thorne replied, standing quickly. "Do you think it's the sound of a smoldering diplomatic disaster?" A crack split the floor, and the chamber shuddered violently. Instruments tumbled to the ground, their strings twanging discordantly. "Time to go," Thorne shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm and racing back towards the stairs as the chamber began collapsing in on itself. They sprinted upward, each step a testament to survival instincts over sense. By the time they reached the surface, the ritual site was a maelstrom of dust and chaos. The Vindicator's alarms screeched a symphony of doom as they clambered aboard, breathless and battered. "What the hell happened?" Thorn barked, slamming the comms panel. "Report. Our exploration must have triggered a seismic event," Lyra panted, staring at the screens as data poured in. "The whole area's destabilized. We're caught in a chain reaction." "Perfect," Thorn grumbled, running a hand through his hair. "Just what we need, a natural disaster to add to our diplomatic nightmare." The Krelnar delegation appeared on the main screen, their expressions a mix of horror and accusation. "Captain Thorn," the leader hissed, their tentacles quivering with barely contained rage. "What treachery is this?" Thorn forced a grin that even a condemned man might find too cheery. "Would you believe we were trying to tune an alien guitar and it got away from us?" The leader's eyes narrowed. "Our sensors indicate an imminent collapse of the comet's structural integrity." "Explain." Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm despite the situation. "We discovered a chamber beneath the site, likely an ancient repository for your musical heritage. It appears our explorations destabilized the region. You risked our sacred ground for what?" Another delegate snapped, their tone dripping with contempt. Thorn held up his hands. "Look, I get it. Bad timing, bad call, but we were trying to understand, to connect with your culture. We're not here to destroy." The Krelnar leaders seemed to consider this, their posture relaxing just a fraction. "Your ignorance may have doomed us all," they said, though the edge in their voice softened to something nearing reluctance. "Or," Lyra cut in, a spark of determination in her eyes, "maybe we can still salvage this. Those instruments are evidence of your heritage. Perhaps we can leverage them to demonstrate the non-destructive power of music." Thorn shot her a look that was equal parts admiration and incredulity. "You think we can still turn this around? Do we have a choice?" she replied, meeting his gaze with unwavering confidence. The Krelnar delegation exchanged glances, their own internal debate a silent tempest. Finally, the leader addressed them again, their voice tinged with resignation. "Very well, we will allow you to attempt a demonstration. But know this, Captain Thorn, the fate of your world hangs in the balance." Thorn nodded, the weight of those words pressing down on him like an anvil. "Understood. We'll do everything we can." With that, the delegation's image flickered out, leaving Thorn and Lyra to stare at one another amid the chaos of the bridge. "Guess we better get rehearsing," Thorn said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "If we screw this up, we might as well pick out our sorry we angered the Krelnar condolence cards." Lyra chuckled, shaking her head. Just another day in the life of galactic diplomacy. They set to work, gathering the instruments and attempting to make sense of their alien designs. Each pluck of a string or tap of a drum reverberated through the ship, echoing their desperation and hope in equal measure. Thorn found himself surprisingly adept at coaxing sound from what appeared to be a hybrid between a harp and a defibrillator. Lyra, meanwhile, discovered that a series of tonal vials produced hauntingly beautiful melodies when struck in sequence. As the days wore on, the ship echoed with music, the first sounds on the ISS Vindicator that didn't come from alarms or screams. The melodies were rough, raw, but there was beauty in their imperfection. "Remind me to never volunteer for musical diplomacy again," Thorn said, wiping sweat from his brow after a particularly vigorous jam session. Lyra laughed, the sound buoyant and free. "You never know, Captain. We might be onto something here." On the morning of the fifth day, as the deadline loomed like a cosmic guillotine, Thorn and Lyra prepared for their final performance. The Krelnar delegation reappeared, their expressions a blend of skepticism and begrudging curiosity. "Show us," the leader commanded, their voice echoing across the bridge. Taking a deep breath, Thorn began to play. The sound was hesitant at first, but with each note, confidence grew. Lyra joined in, her melodies weaving through his like a tapestry of sound that defied the odds. The music filled the ship, spilling into the void beyond, reaching out to the Krelnar in a language that transcended words. It was a plea, a promise, a testament to the power of harmony over chaos. As the final notes faded, the bridge fell silent, the echoes of their performance lingering in the air like a secret shared between souls. The Krelnar leader regarded them for a long moment, their expression unreadable. "Your attempt is unexpected," they finally said, their tone softer. "We will deliberate." With that, they vanished from the screen, leaving Thorn and Lyra to stare at the empty space where their fates had been decreed. Thorn exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders as he turned to Lyra. "Well, partner, think we made the right kind of noise?" Lyra grinned, her eyes alight with hope. "If not, we'll make sure that I tried not to destroy the Universe Club has a cool jacket." Thorn chuckled, feeling the weight of the universe lift just a little. "Here's hoping the Krelnar have an ear for Earth music. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of explaining to do back home." As they awaited the final verdict, the ISS Vindicator hummed with the lingering echoes of their performance, a reminder that, in the darkest hours, even a single note could change the course of history. The bridge of the ISS Vindicator was a hotbed of anxiety, awash with the nervous energy of a crew staring down the barrel of intergalactic humiliation. Captain Thorn paced like a caged tiger, his usual swagger somewhat tarnished by the prospect of Earth's cultural legacy being reduced to accidental destroyers of alien heritage. "Music as a weapon of mass destruction," Thorn muttered, half to himself. "Never thought Metallica would be classified alongside nuclear arms." Lyra Voss, ever the optimist in this swirling quagmire of pessimism, was hunched over her data pad, her eyes flicking back and forth across the screen like a cat at a laser show. "I think I've found something," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a hot knife through butter. Thorn stopped pacing, fixing her with a look that teetered between hope and skepticism. "Is it a way to get us out of this mess, or just another reason to wish for a quick death?" "Maybe a bit of both," she replied with a smirk, tapping away at her pad. "The Krelnar's ancient music, it's got this harmonic structure that's weirdly similar to some old Earth tunes." Thorn raised an eyebrow. "You mean to tell me these aliens have a thing for classic rock?" "More like classical music," Lyra corrected him. "Bach, to be precise. The patterns are almost identical. It's like they were listening to the same cosmic radio station just a few millennia apart." "Great," Thorn said, his sarcasm layered thicker than a neutron star. "So aliens are Bach fans. We'll just throw on a wig and some tights and they'll invite us to the Galactic Opera." Lyra chuckled, shaking her head. "No tights, thankfully. But if we can replicate those harmonic structures, we might be able to bridge the gap, show them that our music isn't a threat, just a strangely familiar friend." "Last time I checked, friends didn't cause seismic events," Thorn pointed out. "But what the hell, let's give it a shot. Better than sitting around waiting for doomsday." With that, they set to work. The Vindicator's corridors echoed with the sounds of frantic preparation, crew members scrambling, instruments tuning, the ever-present hum of desperation. Lyra immersed herself in the study of Krelnar musical theory, while Thorn attempted to rally the crew, his pep talks a blend of biting humor and barely veiled dread. In the makeshift band room, a converted storage bay now brimming with alien and human instruments alike, Lyra synced her data pad to the ship's mainframe, projecting harmonic patterns onto the wall like a cosmic light show. "Okay, people," Thorn said, clapping his hands to get their attention. "Our mission, should we choose to accept it, and we really don't have a choice, is to not make Earth look like the musical equivalent of a bull in a china shop." The crew snickered, though the laughter was more about keeping the fear at bay than genuine amusement. "Lyra's found a common thread between our music and theirs," Thorn continued, pointing to the swirling patterns on the wall. "We tap into that, we might just keep our heads attached to our necks, ready to make history or at least not total fools of ourselves." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, along with the clinking of instruments. Thorn picked up an alien stringed contraption that looked like a cross between a harp and a bad mood and began to pluck at it, the notes resonating with a haunting familiarity. As the practice sessions wore on, it became evident that the Krelnar's music wasn't so much about melody as it was about resonance. a kind of harmonic language that spoke more to the soul than to the ear. The crew struggled to emulate it, their fingers and voices stumbling through the alien notes like tourists without a map. Yet, somehow, a sense of unity began to emerge. The strains of their combined effort became more cohesive, each crew member finding a footing in the alien scales. The sound was still raw, still imperfect, but there was a glimmer of something more, something that hinted at understanding, at a connection beyond words. "Remind me why I didn't become an accountant," one of the crew members quipped, wiping sweat from his brow. "At least numbers don't make you question your existence. Because accountants don't get to save the galaxy with the power of song," Lyra replied, her fingers dancing over an alien keyboard with surprising grace. Thorn laughed, his voice echoing through the bay. "And they don't get to wear these snazzy uniforms," he added, tugging at his collar. "That's gotta count for something, right?" As the final day loomed like the slow toll of a funeral bell, Thorn and Lyra prepared for their encore, a performance that would decide the fate of Earth's musical reputation, and possibly its continued existence in the galaxy. The rest of the crew gathered around, their faces a study in determination and barely suppressed panic. The Krelnar delegation appeared once more on the main screen, their expressions inscrutable as ever. "Captain Thorn," the leader said, their voice a mix of skepticism and reluctant curiosity. "You claim to have found a common thread. Show us." Taking a deep breath, Thorn nodded to Lyra, who began by activating the harmonic visualization on the wall behind them. The patterns danced like ghostly specters, shimmering with potential. Thorn strummed the alien strings, and Lyra joined in with the ethereal tones of the tonal vials, their music weaving together in a tapestry that defied chaos. The crew followed suit, their voices and instruments blending into a symphony that echoed the ancient melodies of the Krelnar. The music filled the bay, spilling into the ship, reaching out into the void and beyond. It was a conversation without words, a plea wrapped in harmony, a testament to the shared history of sound that transcended the void between stars. As the last note lingered, a tense silence followed, stretching like an eternity across the cosmos. The crew held their breath, their fate teetering on the edge of the unknown. The Krelnar leader regarded them for a long moment, their eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing the truth of their performance. "This is unexpected," they finally said, their voice softer, tinged with a note of appreciation. "Your music speaks a language forgotten by our kind. It is a language of peace, not war." Thorn exhaled, the relief washing over him like a wave. "Then maybe we can avoid turning Earth into the galaxy's least popular tourist destination." The leader inclined their head, a gesture that seemed to convey both respect and understanding. "We will consider your plea, Captain Thorn. Know that your efforts here today may have preserved more than just your world. They may have rekindled a part of yours." With that, the delegation's image vanished from the screen, leaving the crew to digest the weight of what had just transpired. Thorn turned to Lyra, a grin breaking across his face. "Well, partner, I think we might have just pulled off the biggest Hail Mary in galactic diplomacy." Lyra laughed, relief and triumph mingling in her voice. "And we didn't even have to wear tights." The crew erupted into cheers, the sound as much a release of tension as a celebration of their success. Amidst the chaos, Thorn found himself reflecting on the journey, the unlikely collision of humanities and harmonies, and how close they'd come to disaster. As the Vindicator drifted through the void, the echoes of their performance lingered, a reminder that even in the darkest reaches of space, a single note could resonate across the stars, connecting worlds in ways once thought impossible. Thorn reclined in the captain's chair, a satisfied smirk dancing across his lips. "Next time someone says music can't change the world," he said, "I'll point them to this little debacle." Lyra nodded, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. "Here's hoping the Krelnar have a long memory. And a good sense of rhythm," Thorn added with a chuckle. As they sailed into the vast, uncharted expanse of the universe, the crew of the ISS Vindicator carried with them a newfound understanding, a belief in the power of music, of connection, and of hope, and perhaps, just perhaps, a bit more respect for the cosmic jukebox they'd stumbled into. Because in the end, amidst the stars and shadows, they had discovered something profound, that even the simplest of harmonies could bridge the deepest divides, turning potential enemies into allies and discord into harmony. And so, with a final nod to the cosmos, the ISS Vindicator set course for home, leaving behind the echoes of their concert among the stars, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and the indomitable spirit of exploration. The ISS Vindicator's bridge was a hive of nervous energy, the kind that comes when your future rests precariously on a few notes of music and a whole lot of hope. Captain Thorne paced like an old wolf with a bum leg, eyes darting between the crew and the main screen displaying the Krelnar delegation's familiar stone-faced expressions. "All right, folks," Thorne said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Time to see if Bach can save our butts from becoming intergalactic gossip." "Ready, Lyra?" Lyra Voss, her optimism a stubborn weed in the cracked pavement of skepticism, nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be, considering our lives depend on what's basically a space jam session." Thorne chuckled, dry as a desert with a drinking problem. "Good to know we've got the right attitude." Let's hope the Krelnar have a sense of humor, or at least an appreciation for creative desperation. The makeshift band room, now vibrating with a blend of human and alien sounds, wasn't much to look at. The walls were bare, industrial gray, with wires snaking around like they were trying to escape. Instruments were scattered about, a chaotic orchestra waiting to be conducted. "You know," Lyra remarked as she tuned an alien lyre, which looked more like a torture device for harpists, "if this goes south, at least we can say we went out with style." Thorne snorted. "Style? Lyra, if we blow this, the only style involved will be our dramatic exit from existence." The crew gathered, each one clutching an instrument that seemed more like a mischievous alien pet than a musical tool. A half-dozen faces stared at Thorne, eyes wide and hopeful, like kids waiting to see if their homemade rocket might actually fly or explode. "Remember," Thorne addressed them, "this isn't just about saving our skins. It's about proving that music, even if it sounds like a catfight in a tin can, can be something more than a weapon, or a reason to ban us from the galactic karaoke circuit." One of the crew added, earning chuckles that felt more like therapy than humor. Lyra activated the holographic display, casting the room in ghostly blue light as the harmonic structures appeared, twisting and turning like an ethereal dance. "Let's give these aliens a symphony they won't forget," she said, her fingers poised above the keyboard. With a collective deep breath, they began. Thorne plucked the alien strings, a sound like wind chimes having a nervous breakdown. Lyra's fingers danced over the keys, producing a melody that was haunting yet oddly familiar. The rest of the crew joined in, their voices and instruments a chorus of hopeful chaos. The music swirled around them, a strange brew of earth and alien harmonics that somehow made sense. It wasn't perfect, more like a rough sketch than a masterpiece, but it carried a weight, a sense of connection that transcended the awkward notes. As the final notes faded, a silence fell over the room, heavy and expectant. The Krelnar delegation on the screen remained silent, their expressions unreadable, as if deciding whether to clap or call for reinforcements. Finally, the Krelnar leader spoke, their voice a cautious curiosity. "Your music, it resonates with echoes of our past. It is unexpected." "Unexpected's what we do best," Thorne replied, his grin all teeth and bravado. "Glad we could surprise you." "So what's the verdict? Are we friends, or should we start looking for new careers in space scrap?" The leader tilted their head, a gesture that could mean anything from deep thought to a migraine. "You have shown us that music can be more than a weapon. It can be a bridge." "Good," Thorne said, hiding his relief behind a mask of nonchalance. because we've got plenty more where that came from. Maybe even a mixtape. Lyra glanced at Thorn, her smile one of triumph and shared secret. Looks like our little band might have a future after all. Provided no one throws tomatoes, Thorn quipped, eyeing the screen as if daring the Krelnar to produce cosmic vegetables. The leader inclined their head, a gesture of respect perhaps, or an indication they were seconds away from sneezing. We will consider opening dialogues, they said. Your efforts here have opened a path once thought closed. And just like that, the screen went black, leaving the crew in stunned silence, the kind that follows a near miss or a miracle. Did that just happen? One of the crew asked, her voice a whisper of disbelief. Unless we're all having the same hallucination, Thorn replied. I'd say we just stopped the universe's strangest war with a song. Lyra laughed, the sound bright and free. Maybe next time they'll invite us to the Galactic Music Awards. Thorn shrugged, trying to downplay the fact that his heart was still doing the salsa in his chest. As long as there's an open bar, I'm in. The crew's cheers filled the bay, a mix of joy, relief, and the kind of celebratory chaos that followed any narrowly avoided disaster. Instruments clattered to the floor as they embraced, the sort of camaraderie forged in the fire of shared survival. As the noise subsided, Thorn leaned against the console, his mind whirring with the implications of their success. Well, Lyra, thanks to your crazy idea, we're still in one piece. I guess we owe you more than just applause. Lyra shook her head. Wasn't just me. It was all of us finding a common language in the noise. Great, Thorn said, stretching like a cat waking from a nap. Now let's just hope they don't change their minds and decide we're too noisy to live. Ever the optimist, Lyra teased, her eyes bright with the glow of victory. Someone's got to balance out all this positivity, Thorn replied, not entirely joking. The crew disbanded, returning to their posts with a newfound energy, the kind that comes when you've stared down oblivion and somehow, miraculously, come out on the other side. Where to next, Captain? Lyra asked, as they settled into the bridge. Home, I guess, Thorn said, the word feeling strange and wonderful on his tongue. We've got a story to tell, and I'd like to see the look on Earth Command's face when we tell them how music saved the day. Lyra chuckled. Bet they'll call us mad geniuses or just mad. Probably both, Thorn agreed, setting their course. But hey, at least we're alive to hear them say it. With a shake of his head, Thorn activated the ship's thrusters, the engines humming a familiar tune as the Vindicator turned away from the comet and began its journey back to Earth. As they sped through the vastness of space, Thorn felt a strange sense of peace, an uncharacteristic optimism that, for once, didn't seem misplaced. Against all odds, they'd found a way through the dark with the oldest trick in the book, a little harmony and a lot of hope. Next time someone tells me music isn't powerful, Thorn mused, I'll just point them to this little escapade. Who knew, Lyra said, leaning back in her chair, music really is the universal language. Thorn grinned, the edge of cynicism softened by the recent past. Funny thing that. Here's hoping our Krelnar friends keep that in mind next time they think about turning up the silence. And so, the ISS Vindicator sailed on, leaving behind a newfound understanding in the wake of its passage, a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity and the strange, wonderful universe they called home. With the echoes of their music still resonating in the corridors, the crew settled in for the long journey ahead, ready to face whatever came next with a song in their hearts and a smirk on their lips. The ISS Vindicator hummed along, its crew basking in the surreal afterglow of not having been vaporized for cultural imperialism. Captain Thorn sat in his command chair, feeling, for once, like he had more than a snowball's chance in hell of not screwing up. A cultural exchange, Thorn mused aloud, scratching his chin. Who'd have thought we'd end up as the galaxy's newest rock stars, Lyra Voss, seated at her console with a data pad balanced precariously on her knee, laughed. It was the kind of laugh that suggested she couldn't fully believe their luck but was happy to ride it out. What's next? A greatest hits album with liner notes by the Krellnar. Don't give Earth Command any ideas, Thorn warned. They'll start marketing it as the soundtrack that saved the galaxy. Better than the last thing you'll ever hear, Lyra shot back, tapping away at her data pad. Looks like the Krellnar are sending over some files, cultural stuff, I think. Maybe their version of a mixtape. Thorn shook his head, half amused, half incredulous. First contact via Spotify. Who knew? The bridge crew laughed, relief still palpable in the air. It was an odd mix of camaraderie and disbelief, like they'd just survived an all-you-can-eat buffet with deadly consequences. Got anything interesting? Thorn leaned over Lyra's shoulder, peering at the alien characters flashing across the screen like a subliminal message for the insane. Let's see, Lyra said, scrolling through the files. There's some ancient Krellnar rituals, a dissertation on why Earth music isn't as dangerous as they thought. And oh, the Krellnar Guide to Harmony. Looks like they're really diving into this whole music thing. Great, Thorn said. Maybe they'll finally realize that Stairway to Heaven isn't an actual architectural suggestion. This could be the start of something big, Lyra added, her voice softening with something dangerously close to hope. A chance for real peace and understanding. Thorn grunted, a non-committal sound that could mean anything from agreement to indigestion. Just so long as it doesn't mean more meetings. I'm not sitting through another intergalactic PowerPoint presentation on cultural synergy. As they spoke, the comms panel chimed, signaling an incoming transmission. The Krellnar leader's face appeared, stone-faced as ever, but with a hint of what might have been a smile or a grimace. Hard to tell with all those mandibles. Captain Thorn, Lyra Voss, the leader began, their voice a curious blend of formal and tentative. We have conferred among our council. Your musical overture has prompted us to reconsider our previous stance. Reconsider. Thorn echoed, trying not to sound like a man who'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket with his name spelled wrong. Yes, the leader continued, we wish to initiate a cultural exchange, to learn from each other's histories and evolve together. Evolve? Lyra asked, raising an eyebrow. That's a big word for let's not shoot each other. Precisely, the leader replied, deadpan. It seems your music has shown us that understanding is possible. Well, we aim to please, Thorn said, nodding as if this was all part of the plan and not a cosmic accident. What do you have in mind? The Krellnar leader tilted their head, a gesture that now seemed less migraine-y and more thoughtful. We invite you to visit our homeworld. To share in our traditions as we learn of yours. A meeting of worlds sounds like a party, Thorn said, leaning back in his chair. Do we need to bring anything? Dip, maybe. Lyra stifled a laugh, covering it with a cough. I think they are more interested in cultural insights than cocktail sausages, Captain. Suit yourself, Thorn shrugged. But don't say I didn't offer. The leader inclined their head, looking as if they were getting used to the human propensity for humor, or at least pretending to. We will transmit coordinates and further instructions. We hope this will mark the beginning of a new era. With a click, the transmission ended, leaving behind the kind of silence that followed proclamations of peace or declarations of war. Either could be equally fatal, but today seemed to favor the former. Well, Thorn said, turning to Lyra with a grin that couldn't quite disguise his relief. Looks like we're heading deeper into the rabbit hole, or wormhole, Lyra added, eyes dancing with the challenge of the unknown. Think Earth Command'll give us a medal, Thorn snorted. Medal? More like a stern lecture and a pat on the back. Maybe a free sandwich. Hey, I'll take the sandwich, Lyra said, standing to stretch. After all this, I'm starving. As the crew prepared for the next chapter of their unlikely diplomacy, Thorn couldn't help but feel an unfamiliar sensation, a flicker of genuine optimism. Maybe it was the adrenaline or the absurdity of a universe that could be saved with little more than pluck and a catchy tune. All right, Thorn announced to the bridge. Next stop, Krellnar. Remember, folks, smile, play nice, and whatever you do, don't start humming We Will Rock You. As the laughter died down, the Vindicator altered course, setting its sights on the Krellnar homeworld. The crew buzzed with a mix of apprehension and excitement, the kind that came before a mission they knew could redefine history, or at least their careers. "Think we'll get along?" one of the younger crew members asked, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Hell, if we can get along with ourselves, anything's possible," Thorne replied, keeping his tone light but his mind wary. As they traveled, Lyra and the rest of the crew immersed themselves in the Krellnar cultural files. They learned about a civilization built on harmony, disrupted by time and forgotten echoes now revived by Earth's music. It was a history lesson with a twist of the surreal, one that both intrigued and sobered them. "I think we're making progress," Lyra said one evening, her voice thoughtful as she sifted through Krellnar audiovisuals. "There's a lot we can learn from them." And vice versa, Thorne nodded, the glow of the screen casting strange shadows across his face. "Let's just hope they don't decide humanity's best contribution to the galaxy is shutting up." "Captain," Lyra, the comms officer, interrupted. "We're approaching the Krellnar system." "Here we go," Lyra muttered, glancing at Thorne for reassurance. "All right, everyone," Thorne announced, standing a little straighter, his voice steady despite the swirl of nerves in his gut. "Let's make this count." As they drew closer, the Krellnar homeworld came into view, a planet of silvery hues and sprawling cities, its surface glittering like an intricate mosaic of technology and nature. It was a sight that lifted the spirits, a testament to what both species could achieve together. "Think they'll roll out the red carpet?" Lyra asked as they approached the landing zone. "More likely a blue one," Thorne replied, tongue firmly in cheek. "But if they've got confetti, I'll count it as a win." With a final shudder, the Vindicator touched down, its crew bracing for whatever awaited them in this brave new world. As the ramp descended, Thorne and Lyra led the way, their posture a careful balance of confidence and humility, a tricky tightrope walk in any galaxy. The Krellnar delegation waited, their expressions a touch more relaxed, perhaps owing to their newfound appreciation for Earth's quirks. The leader stepped forward, their attire a complex weave of colors, each thread a note in a visual symphony. "Welcome to Krellnar," the leader said, their voice carrying a note of genuine warmth. "We hope your visit will be as enlightening for you as it is for us." "Thanks for having us," Thorne replied, inclining his head in the closest approximation of a formal bow he could muster without risking a pulled muscle. "We're looking forward to learning more about you." As the delegation led them through the city, the crew marveled at the architecture, each structure a blend of symmetry and sound, where every surface seemed to sing or whisper, echoing the planet's musical heritage. "Feels like we're walking through an album cover," Lyra observed, her voice tinged with awe. Thorne nodded, resisting the urge to hum a few bars of something appropriately epic. "Let's just hope the tracklist doesn't include Die, Humans Die." Their tour included a visit to the Chamber of Echoes, a vast hall where the history of the Krellnar was preserved through sound and light. As the ancient harmonics played, weaving a tapestry of stories, Thorne couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Lyra stood beside him, her expression thoughtful. "Music really is universal," she said softly. "It connects us across time and space." "Yeah," Thorne agreed, his usual snark softening under the weight of the moment. "And for once it's not trying to kill us." As the tour continued, the crew learned more about the Krellnar, about their struggles and triumphs, their hopes and fears. It was a crash course in mutual understanding, the kind that came when walls came down and bridges were built. "So," Lyra said as they wrapped up the day, standing on a balcony overlooking the city, "think we really made a difference?" Thorne considered this, the city's lights twinkling like stars in the distance. "I think," he said finally, "we showed both our worlds that there's more to life than conflict. That maybe, just maybe, we've got more in common than we thought. Who knew we had it in us?" Lyra mused, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Not me," Thorne admitted, chuckling. "But hey, I've been wrong before." As the sun set on the Krellnar horizon, the crew of the ISS Vindicator prepared for their return trip, their hearts a little lighter, their minds a little more open. "Ready to head home?" Lyra asked as they boarded the ship, her tone a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. "Yeah," Thorn replied, casting one last look at the alien city. "I think we've earned it." As the engines roared to life and the Vindicator lifted off, Thorn couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. They'd come to the brink of disaster and found a way through with a little help from music, a reminder that the universe was a strange, unpredictable place full of surprises. "Think they'll miss us?" Lyra asked as the planet shrank behind them. "Probably," Thorn said, grinning at the thought. "But if not, at least we've left them with something to talk about." And as the ISS Vindicator set course for home, its crew couldn't help but wonder what other adventures awaited them in the great, wide universe. Whatever came next, they knew they'd face it with a song in their hearts and a smirk on their lips.